Loud. Okay.
Okay, let's see. Got it. There we go.
Okay, so the recording started. Let's go now to all these things. Hopefully, let me.
And even live streamed. Uh-oh, now I'm in trouble. Now you have to understand at 73, I don't have as many limits on what I might normally say as when I was younger. But my second great granddad taught mathematics till he was 88. So it does turn out that living around great minds at universities and in the ICPC actually, I think, keeps you young longer.
Yeah, that's exactly the one that I think. Actually, I think we are live here. Let me just check to make sure that we are like at the YouTube. Everything we are live. Great. Here, let me just check to make sure that we are like at the YouTube. Everything we are live. Great. I think we are live now. I think it should be in almost. I believe we are live at Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. All of them together. So.
Okay, great. So hold on. Let's go through them. What was the first one that we're live on?
So we are YouTube.
Yeah.
Instagram.
Okay, now Google's first chief technology officer was a world champion, Craig Silverstein.
Great.
And Facebook's first chief technology officer as well was a silver medalist in the ICPC, and he's founder of Quora. Let's see, I think the founder of VMware, which probably is somewhere along that line, or someone else. Yeah. Oh, I could go through all of the list, but let's go ahead.
Yeah, great. So I think, so we are essentially grateful to have Professor Bill Poucher from Baylor University. He, as I mentioned actually in the announcement, he's an ACM fellow, but more importantly, probably he's one of the most influential people in training of the best and brightest young. I think some of them were young before, not that young, maybe late now, of programmers essentially in the world, especially about this ICPC programming contest. I think it was before ACM ICPC programming contest. Now it is ICPC programming contest. We will talk about these things. And yeah, so I think we are starting. So there are lots of participation. We were just talking with Bill. I think just, I think in he mentioned like there are maybe more than 400,000 alumni, correct? Or just last year? Yeah, alumni at least, yeah. And as he just started, essentially mentioned the Facebook, VMware, and Google chief technologists, or like high-ranking people, they all have been essentially in ICPC, and they got actually medals, etc. And actually,
Telegram, you know, Snapchat, VK, you know, so that what's great about the ICPC is that it is what we had dreamed of so many years ago, some 35 years ago, a global competition, you know, that has doorways without doors. It's great. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Great. So, that's like, actually, let me also start to say a little bit about, I mean, how did I essentially get familiar with Bill? So I think it was year 2000, or actually 1999. So I had just, I mean, this is another issue that we are talking. I got a silver medal in informatics Olympiad. That's one thing before, one step before that. It just entered essentially the university. And I mean, there I was in Sharif University. At that time, there was no ICPC essentially. That was, I think, the beginning of that. We had this site essentially. And with, I think, Professor Qudsi, I had actually some live with him before as well. So there actually he, I think, talked with you and the whole organization, and we started essentially having the first ICPC at that time. And all the time, essentially, we will we heard a lot about Bill Potter. I mean, he's the main person is running that, and this is the thing. So I always, I mean, had a great, essentially respect for Bill. And there actually, that year in the ICPC in, I think that was in Tehran, our team unfortunately became, got second rank. We were first, just, I mean, some issues, and we got second rank. And unfortunately, from each university, only one team can go. So we couldn't go to World Final. But of course, then I continued actually a few years later when I joined University of Maryland, become the coach of the University of Maryland, and essentially contacted and bothered Bill a lot about lots of issues and talked about different things. So I think I thought that would be great to have such a live to talk. I think some memory about ICPC, the past, current, and future. Bill can talk a little bit about himself, how did come to this idea of ICPC and other stuff, and then we will continue. So, okay, so I think maybe just start a little bit about early in your life. So did you want to be essentially a scientist? I mean, did you think that you will be at this place?
Well, you know, it's really, really funny when you look back, you know, because ultimately you are who you are, right? And I lived in 14 different places in the first 10 years of my life. You know, I was born at Auburn, Alabama, in the infirmary at Auburn University, which was called API back then. And my father taught Air Force ROTC, you know, in the first year of the U.S. Air Force, because U.S. Air Force was not defined until 1947. And my family is an extended family, and I had the opportunity to live in a lot of places. So I was never a hometown person until I was in my probably early teens. And you know, it's an interesting thing because you get to meet lots of people, different cultures. You get in an immense number of fistfights because in those days, anytime you moved to a new place, there would always be a bully who'd want to see if they could terrorize you or something like that. And you know, what can I say? I'm not easily affected by such things. I heal easily and whatever. But I had the advantage of growing up in a really broad environment. Even in terms of my mother and father, my mother was Old South and my father was Old North. My mother was born in 1918, started school when she was 4, and I think graduated university when she was 19 or something. And my father was Old North, born in 1903 in Sampsonville, New York. I don't think the two families had intermarried since the Pilgrims came, you know. And my father met my mother in 1941, dated 6 consecutive days, and proposed. Okay. Yeah. And my mother called her mother for permission, and my grandmother gave permission based on 3 requirements. Now, this is totally classic because you have to understand the world I grew up in was principle-based, commitment-based, you know, and those 3 commitments were that he had to give up drinking, okay, number 1. He had to never curse in her presence, number 2, right? And 3, he had to provide a housekeeper when she was with child because he was career military. In other words, you had to not threaten the home, you know, you had to respect your wife, and you had to have more than just the family unit, community, even if you had to hire someone to do that, right? And my father agreed to that, kept that commitment his whole life, okay? And it was known within my grandmother's family as the only negotiation my grandmother ever lost. She thought she had him on number 1, right? So I laugh about it, but ultimately my father became her favorite. and the environment in my grandmother's home, which was that you had goodwill, that you followed the golden rule, and you had unqualified affection for each other, is the ICPC way that we deal with everything. And now also you had to compete for attention because there were a bunch of cousins there. So that's also part of the competition. So whenever you look at the ICPC and the policies and procedures and such, which I think the Code of Ethics is 1 page, it doesn't have to be long, right? It doesn't have to be full of rules. You see, when you see other people as souls, okay, when you engage in the uplift of the next generation, you see, to build a better world and to be equipped with the capacity to do it and the desire to do it. I mean, life just doesn't get any better than that. You know, there is, though, a considerable amount of work to make it work.
Great. Yeah, I think so. It is somehow this kind of extended rules from your earlier life that essentially all came to ICPC, I think, plus competing. I think that's the part that has been added. And that's essentially the current rules of ICPC, I believe.
Why, sure, because you only get better if you can compete together with others to improve your ability. And the stronger the other people are, the more you learn. In fact, we sometimes say that we give the World Championship trophy to the team that really didn't benefit from the experience because they were better than everybody else.
Great. Yeah, I think actually that's the thing that I had. I mean, some of the other lives I mentioned, I talked like with Professor Matri at MIT. I got my PhD from MIT. And I mentioned like MIT is MIT just because of the people and the like faculties and the students that they are competing. That's the same thing. And even we talk about the companies in US, they are, I mean, generally very strong companies because they are competing with each other. This competition, as long as, I mean, it is like a very good competition and like a good in a sense that, I mean, you don't want to essentially take the leverage on something and try to kill your competitor. That would be the great things. That's exactly the thing that we are doing at ICPC.
Well, you see, I think the thing to remember about it is this: together. You see, when we compete together, we get better. You know, we can figure out how to bind our strengths together. That's why we have team competition. You know, you could say, well, they ought to have more resources. Well, my experience has been whenever you're discovering something new, you aren't going to have more resources. You're going to have less. But the teammates that you have, the interaction that you have, the knowledge of who's good at what, the teaching between students and among the community makes all the difference. And I think one of the most important things is to sort of have a little bit of my life experience, but more faster. That is, when you have a team of 3 at a university, I promise you they come from different places, different environments, different families, right? And then when they compete with other teams to perform better, you see, that's the purpose. It's not to, you know, in the ICPC, you can't unplug the other team's computer, right? You can't lock somebody in a closet or anything of that variety. You're competing to see how good you can do, but far more importantly, you're raising the bar of excellence. And you know, as a coach, right? When you got a team turned on to competitive programming, it not only raised their bar, but all of the students they interact with all of a sudden discover they can perform better. And we want them to be builders of a better world, not just, an employee. And when I say employee, I just an employee, you know, that's probably an inappropriate way. But we're looking for them to get on that road that they need to pave toward, you know, as soon as they possibly can, and to feel good about it in their heart. you know, and we do like for them to have a good job and paycheck too.
Yeah, I think you say essentially that you want to have more leaders in that sense. Essentially, that's the.
Well, sometimes we use that term, but I like to use the term servant leader. Okay, and that is, they understand that first of all, don't you want to be happy? You know, frame the world with that question. Then the second one is to be happy. Okay, then you need to be surrounded by happy people. You can help people be happy by providing services to other persons, and that's the miracle. That's the miracle of computing and software development. With it is that you can build services that deliver benefits, opportunity, a prosperity to other people at incredibly fast paces. And so we're all in the struggle, okay, to establish peace and prosperity for our community. And if there are disagreements, to get that down to small disagreements that can be solved between people who are working on building trust with each other. And when we have that, you know, the universe had better stand back, because our grandkids, our kids, our grandkids, and those beyond are going to be discovering marvelous new worlds and crafting new relationships all at the same time.
Great. Okay, so let's go, I mean, a bit faster. I mean, so by the way, one thing, how old are you? I think I didn't check that one. I mean, if you want, so.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry.
So I'm saying, how old are you?
How old am I?
Yeah.
About 20 minutes. Oh, sorry. Oh, you're talking about my age. I'm 73 years old.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one the thing. I didn't find it, so I want to just. I mean, I didn't want to just get something wrong. That's a great thing. So that's a great. Essentially, you mentioned about these family values that later actually came as part of ICPC and some extended version of them. So have you done any? I mean, like, did you? Because I think you also, you can talk a little bit about your PhD and your research. I think because you are also working the algorithm world. When did you start math and CS? And then, yeah.
Okay, so I told you I was raised in an extended family, right? And I started my education, gosh, I don't know, 4 or 5, something like that. My mother used to have, she had a programmable calculator, I guess it was, you know, that she used for accounting. And we used to have races. She would add a large number of numbers up and print out a paper tape, and then I'd have to add them up and get the correct result as fast as she could re-enter them, you know. So I grew up with computation as being a pretty natural thing. And after my father was disabled, we ultimately settled back in Auburn University. And my extended family included a professor of chemistry, physical chemistry. He invented phosphate chemistry, Tide, you know, that sort of thing. A professor of genetics who is an expert at plant breeding, a physical chemist. You know, my mother and my father were very pro education. And there was just always someone, you know, who knew the answer or could direct me where I needed to direct. And Auburn was just an absolutely great place to grow up. I think it was the case that something like 57% of the population of the little town had taken graduate courses. It's so in terms of my education, it was always my responsibility to learn, but I really had great teachers. When I took Algebra 1 in high school, my teacher had a PhD in math, right? So I was just, as I indicated, very, very fortunate to be in a rich environment, and we're in a space race. So one of the things that happened when it was time for me to go to college was that I had the GI Bill, because I was a war orphan. That's an unfortunate situation. I had tremendous support from family. I had a really good background. I had a love of music. I actually was a music major initially. However, they made me take a calculus course. Okay. And I didn't want to take a calculus course. I'd had plenty of math. Uncle Harry, actually, he was the uncle of my best friend and extended family brother, Bob Greenleaf. Harry Goheen was certainly a computer scientist. Uncle Harry was one of the founders of ACM. Okay, he worked for Howard Aiken on the Mark series of computers and also with Eckert and Mockley, right? So I guess he had his own personal computer because I think he was one of the architects of the first stored program machine for IBM. He also solved the compaction problem of spheres, which led to making it possible to have a fusion nuclear bomb. He never told anybody much about that because, well, that's the backside of life. That's not what universities are about. Universities are about extending the knowledge and capacity of the past through for the next generation to build on our strengths. It's really funny. The other day, somebody was talking about a university of a particular country, and I said, but the university you're talking about was formed in 1750. The university is older than the United States. Okay, so don't attribute what they have to do in order to maintain that wonderful educational resource for all of humanity, but specifically for the community they serve because of problems that exist right now. But at any rate, I'm sorry, I diverted. Remember, I speak for 50 minutes at a time as a college professor. So let's get back to what was going on. I had a great education, and I went to Auburn University, again, a bit of a change of plans, and Florida State University, and then came back. Now that was during the Vietnam War era. And I had told you that they made me take a math course. Well, I will always remember Dr. Stiles coming in and said, I've never taught an undergraduate math class. Okay, now, all right. However,
that's not good, actually, yeah.
I'm going to teach this course the way it ought to be taught. And so he taught a course in real variables. Well,
so was it in the which university?
My first course in calculus was a graduate course, effectively, or a senior course in mathematics. And it was just what I needed, because all of a sudden a continuous function wasn't something that had jumps in it. And I'd ask, what's a jump? And nobody knew. He showed me the math. He showed me the algebra, and it was beautiful. And I became a double major and then ultimately majored in math. And then they made me take a computer science course. Now I already knew how to program a little bit, and doggone if I didn't become a combinatorialist. And I went back to Baylor and studied under Kurt Lindner, whose major professor was Trevor Evans, and in combinatorial algorithms and coding theory and so forth. And I just had a great education. And in 75, I graduated.
From University of Florida?
From Auburn University. I went back to Auburn. I could tell you why, but we get lost in the Vietnam War.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So then, when did you join Baylor? So was it your first job?
Well, it was an interesting thing, but because I was raised to be able to take multiple tracks. I loved academia, I loved music, but I was also raised during wartime. My family had been in war extended family from 1917 to whenever, And so my training along that line really had to do with more about how to cope with it, and how to recognize it, and how to help minimize the danger and maximize the reformation of the community afterwards. Right. So when war came, my father's advice was very simple: protect those in danger, aid those in need, and comfort those who are suffering. And you can do that every day of your life. I chose, when I had the choice, to do that for the community that provided help for me, which was the simple, basic Christian university communities. And so I decided to go to David Lipscomb rather than University of Toronto or NSA or Bell or whatever, because I wanted to give back to my community. And then I went to Abilene Christian University, which was joyous, but very difficult to get a critical mass of computer science scientists. And in '83, I moved to Baylor, and I put in 39 years, and that has been a wonderful experience. Wonderful people around me. A challenge, yes. Dysfunction from time to time, of course. It's
everywhere.
It's the world. But, you know, to try to uplift and to encourage bright students to fully develop is just a joyful experience. And the ICPC that I had been exposed to at Abilene Christian, we had a good friend Dwight Caulfield, you know, co-coached with him. I actually met Don Gatros, who recruited me for Baylor, who was a coach as well. In fact, he won the championship the year before, and my team beat him in the regionals. But one of the brightest students I've ever had, Kerry Gray, sort of got stuck on a problem at the finals. So we had a lot in common, caring about students, and a large number of us, I'm often credited as a founder or whatever, but a good number of us realized how important it was to have extracurricular activities for really gifted, motivated students who could build a better world. And so that's what we did. And in the early 80s, with the help of Joe DeBlasi and others, we decided this needs to be global without boundaries.
Sorry, which year did you? So okay, so let me ask a few questions before that. So I think like somehow this was also I think part of your work also like a research work was also on algorithms, correct?
Oh, sure. Okay, well, that was sort of interesting. I did combinatorial analysis. I suppose in 1974, I got my first letter from the NSA classifying what I did as non-exportable and all of this kind of stuff. But I love to build systems, you know, and so I liked to make things, and I really was able to do a lot of interesting work. But I like to focus on building the interior of the envelope rather than protecting the exterior of the envelope of civilization. So I did work on I built a system for the particle beam accelerator at Los Alamos. That was fun. That was when it was with the LAMP facility, and then during Star Wars it moved over into the weapons division. I don't do weapons research, but I do understand that it's important extremely at times. But let me think. I did some work for that was well, probably the thing that I did the most in was building tools for synthetic vaccine research and things of that variety. Now, part of the reason for that is that I could. Now, most of that work was proprietary. I am a very one of my friends called me I was sort of a troubleshooter developer. Okay, so so I built I was a ghostwriter of Insight clone system. I was the architect of Johnson & Johnson's drug discovery system, a number of other things. I helped connect up Scripps Research with R.W. Johnson. I sized the computing resources for the parties that did what are called MRIs now, and that was fun, you know. But the deal was that I would do something and then I was leave and don't call me because I hate doing it. Yeah, I hate.
The maintenance is, can be actually quite, time taking.
The other thing that was fun was I built a system for designing new homes that actually saved on construction and reduced the power consumption by 50%. And 55,000 homes have been built using that with a guarantee, and nobody's ever looked at it. So those are the things I liked to do.
Great. Okay, so let me ask you this one. So I think at that time then, so you talk a little bit about your research, both algorithms and system. Actually, both are important. Like I was involved also in...
Now, understand I taught software engineering when it first started, and I felt like that I was going to teach software engineering. You know, I should do some of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, both of them are important. Like I was like, after I mentioned, like myself, essentially, I was involved like in this informatics Olympiad, then ICPC, and then I was actually involved in RoboCup. If you heard about it, this is essentially competition between robots. And our team actually got the first rank in the Europe and the third rank in the world that year. And I think both system and algorithms are important. So let me ask you this question. So when you talk about the ICPC is more like the algorithms part, less of the system things. So why why you didn't think about more system things? Was there also any other competition at that time that you started, anything that somehow similar?
Well, the ICPC is the root of all competitive programming in the digital millennium. I mean, there's just no doubt about that. It actually started in 1970 at Texas A&M and the Alpha chapter of UPE Honor Society did that. And the team sizes were between 4 and 5 per university that showed up, simply because if you took the number of key punch machines and the number of competitors, the ratio is between 4 and 5. So this way, everybody had their own key punch machine. So we evolved over a period of time, you know, into teams of 4. And one of my contributions was to design the process for contests that operated on microcomputers, because that was the other thing I was a part of, which was the microcomputer revolution, which was great. So, you know, like I met Bill Gates and Steve Jobs back when they were student aged in 78 or somewhere along that line. I always remember seeing Jobs the first time, you know. So, you know, he had his dark jeans and, you know, the turtleneck, and he had hair everywhere, you know, mustache and everything. And he was peering at you. I thought he was on cocaine, but he wasn't, you know. And he didn't have any shoes on, and he smelled like a rotten banana. Okay. And Woz was demonstrating, you know, the pre-Mac apples. I can't remember whether it was an Apple I or Apple II. And he's a wonderful guy, you know. So what happens? Well, I ended up teaching I think the first course in programming on Macintoshes later on, because Apple had given me some early. And as I recall, I think I had breakfast with the very polished Steve Jobs, you know, at the top of the mark in 1983 or 84. So what I'm telling you is that a lot can happen in people's lives. And first, in fact, and I think 89, Steve invited me to join him with a corporation called Next, which ultimately became Apple's greatest product, which is actually macOS. And when you get right down to it, so that was a lot of fun. But of course, I didn't do it. I'm an old Texan. See my blue bonnets out there. I teach bright students computer science, and we just work with my friends everywhere in the world to do the same for other bright students. Huh?
Great. Okay, so I think so that's actually interesting. So that is this idea of having a group of people working on some kind of competitive programming that even was before the, like, I think the card punch at that time, even there was such a thing. And maybe actually, is it the case that maybe the fact that there are 3 people essentially in a team, not 1, for example, not 2, or like that came somehow from this idea that you need more than like 1 person essentially to do the programming?
Well, here's the thing. Problem solving is done in the mind, okay? And the most important thing that we needed to develop were people's understandings of data structures, people's understanding of algorithms, and their ability to actually apply them and compute them with an honest to goodness computer. Okay, they needed to understand theory of computation, because we're not just trying to put out an app. We're trying to help students build layers of technology that were absolutely dependable. So the problems that are solved in the ICPC have to be solved with all of the boundary conditions as well. And you have to be clever to be able to do them in a short period of time. But the reason we have 3 per team was that at one time we had 4 per team. Why? Because of the ratio of the number of kids who showed up to key punches. But bright people, once they compete, once they discover and define a set of rules, don't want that changed. Well, one year I was looking at it and I was just saying we can invite 24 teams of 4, right? And so you tell me why I argued and succeeded in convincing everybody that we needed to go with 32 teams of 3. Well, because it was easy for me to get my friends to donate more computers for us to use at the World Finals, right? But money is harder, right? So that's the reason we have teams of 3. But what was funny, whoops, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah.
Okay, so but what was funny, and let me finish this. What was funny was the team of 3 with 1 computer was more productive than the team of 4.
That's actually about, I mean, like, you know, I'm writing papers a lot, and this is also important when you write papers. Actually, this number 3 as the quarters is one of the best, because below 3, I mentioned that like when 2 people are doing research, actually the power of research would be not like maybe 2x, maybe 4 times. When 3 they are doing research, I think it would be the power would be like not 3 times, maybe around 7 times. After that, essentially decreases, like 4 maybe, because there might be some free rider at that point. Actually, 3 is the best number for the number of co-authors for a paper as well, like the best things.
Well, look at it as a combinatorialist would. Okay, if you have 2, okay, either the 2 work independently or they interrupt each other. You know, all right.
Yes.
But if you have 3, right, how many pairs do you have in there? Right?
3, of course. Yeah.
3, of course, right? And so you can continue working without interruption, but one can assist the other in debugging. And we all know that debugging is the finest way to debug is to have a peer look at your work, right?
Or actually,
you know, when you go to 4, the number of pairs just increases immensely, doesn't it? You know, because you have the combinational explosion. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, like, I think one of the, like, I think this programming contest, even actually when we write the paper, I mean, we were writing some paper with Eric Demain. We were doing this, that one of us writing the papers, the other one was checking. That was online things that we were doing. And that was always good, like even for programming or writing papers. When you write something, it is good that someone is there and just look at what you write and try to correct the issues. And of course, you may solve solve any issues together, or that person may raise it. I think that's a great way of writing papers or writing codes, as you mentioned. So that's actually nice things about the number 3. Like, as you mentioned, 2 maybe is just like 2 people working either independently. It doesn't mean that much, or they want to interrupt each other. That might be also not the best thing. But 3 is somehow is a good number. Now I believe actually more in number 3. So actually one other thing that I wanted to discuss, this is somehow related also to this IUI, like informatics in informatics Olympiad. I think that actually happened several years, I mean, after Icpc, because the time actually, for me, actually, I didn't know about Icpc because the time that I was in Sharif University, at that time, there was no Icpc until like 1999 or something like this. But there was a IUI. But I think that's interesting thing, that actually that IUI may happen because of the Icpc as well.
Oh, of course, but IOI is absolutely great. You know, however, it's directed at pre-college students.
Yes.
Right? So think of the world differently than a world of state governments. Okay. There is also the world of great institutions that reach back over 1,000 years. Okay. The problem of helping build and improve and evolve human civilization has been going on for a long, long time. The idea of enlightenment, sometimes people refer to that as occurring in the 1700s. It goes back to the 700s. It goes back to the 300 BC. You know, the Socratic method of teaching is competitive teaching in a sense. Okay, but what do we do at the high school level? Well, high school education has evolved to be more a creature of the state. Like in the United States, it's under our state governments. You see, the funding comes from there. Why? Well, to make sure that everyone is educated, you need to have investment and opportunity and things of this variety. But it's more complicated. And so IOI evolved with lots and lots of ICPCers and still lots and lots of ICPCers. But it's more focused on rather than being a competition of the universities of the world, it's the competition of high schoolers from the countries of the world. You see, and that's very helpful because it's easier to have investment, you see, because in ICPC, the support comes from universities and industry and university friends. The governments play a huge role in the success of universities. But we bring those 3 things together with IOI. It again is much more structured, you know, like the Olympics, for instance.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we're great supporters of the IOI for a number of reasons. One of them is that if you perform well in the IOI, you're going to perform well in the ICPC, exactly. Right? Yeah, and what I love about it is you're also going to get scholarships to go to school, just like I did, and go on to graduate school. I had the NDA fellowship that paid all of my expenses for 3 years, thanks to Star Wars and thanks to going to putting somebody on the moon. Today, if you do very well in the ICPC, you meet other people that you might form a company with on down the line, but you're heavily wanted in graduate school because they know you can perform.
Exactly. I think that's like, I think in lots of countries, not just, maybe even actually in US a bit less. Like for example, in Iran, if you got, if you could go to you get a medal in the IOI, then you could go to any university essentially. Actually, if you get just a gold nationally even, it's like 6 people get it and 4 people go to international competition. These 6 people, they can go to any university, essentially any areas in math or computer science or even physics and others. So that's like a great opportunities. And of course, as you mentioned, like when we want to also now select, for example, at University of Maryland, PhD students, those that are good at ICPC or IOI, that plays a very important role, especially if you work more in the field of algorithms. I think in everywhere, like these people work not only in algorithm, later these people had done great things at vision, I don't know, at ML and lots of other areas, systems and others. So, but I think just the way of algorithmically thinking is like the one that you want to have it.
Well, you know, when we look at the Icpc Foundation, for instance, the Icpc operates under. The Icpc Foundation is supportive of competitive learning programs everywhere, and specifically those that open doors of opportunity for people. So there are a number of reasons why people don't compete. Sometimes it's because they don't have the opportunity. Sometimes it's because they're not encouraged. Sometimes they're actually discouraged, but I've seen very little of that. With the Icpc Foundation, we look for people who are doing things, making a difference, and see if we can be catalytic in helping them do that work. So we do that in addition to providing, if you would, the umbrella for the Icpc community that operates everywhere in the world. And so that's been exciting, and we're in the process of growing that out tremendously. An example perhaps would be Algo Queen, that is operated by Amrita University in India by ICPCers, and that has an outreach. I think, I'm not sure if it's 12,000 or 16,000 young women are competing in that right now. One of the things that happened when we went to Morocco is we looked and we said, hey, I wonder how we could increase participation of young women. Well, in looking a little closer, and that was pretty easy because an Icpc founder was Sidi Malinin, was advisor to the Queen, who's a computer science major. And it turned out that a number of the high schools that were all female, just like the US and in earlier times, really had a traditional curriculum and didn't necessarily have the labs or the teachers for the young people. Well, the Prime Minister looked at that, and they had a program for seeding out the equipment and encouraging competition. And next year we had 1,000 young women compete. Example, why didn't they compete? 2 reasons. They didn't have the equipment, okay? And the most important equipment is a good coach. And they didn't have encouragement. And once that was solved, that occurred. Now, we recognized in Africa and the Arab region, the Girls Code 2 program, which came from that, which is operated by some of the young women who made the competition work in the first place. And I think last year they had 4,000 in competition. So we don't think that the problems of the world are fixed by statistical adjustments. They're fixed by enlarging the envelope, the funnel of opportunity for people, encouraging them to participate. And if they joined later in life than the others, have ways of accelerating their performance. So that's why we're also opening up some interesting workshops for folks. In fact, we have a workshop that we're planning to have in Poland in September that will be open to participants. Some we're having to find right now because of the challenges that face the world in that area. But at any rate, go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, sometimes I'm coughing. I try to mute such that I don't interrupt you. Yes, so I think that's actually a nice view that you said. I mean, that we discussed actually also this one together. So this idea that, I mean, if we want more diversity, for example, female or any other type of diversity, it's better to, I mean, don't just try to do it artificially at later to just increase the statistics. But let's start early on, put heavily essentially, see what are the major problems there, and try to solve those problems at the roots essentially, instead of later on try to essentially just manipulate the system such that the numbers look good essentially. Because you may do it for some time, but again, whenever you don't do that, then essentially everything is broken. But if you start from the roots, that's something that will remain. And I think that was the thing that actually one of the questions that I had is about that you already answered about how can we have more women essentially in computing, especially more in like this kind of competitive programming, which might be I think the coach is important to have coaches. And that was actually another interesting thing. Like, for example, in China, I think there's some earlier stages that they want to form some teams. We had, I think, we talked with Professor Ellen Shi, and she mentioned that there they had these things that like among the team of 3, 1 person should be essentially female. Like essentially you should have the gender diversification, but very early on, not necessarily later on. I think this is some of the thing that helps a lot, because early on you can bring the people, and then after that essentially the fire goes its way essentially.
Here is the thing: the big problem you have with metrics. You can fool yourself. There is so much focus on appearance that because that's easy, that we're not making the level of investment that we need to make in creating opportunity. You see, and so that's why we do in the ICPC, we look and we know people who are making a difference, and they figured out how to make a difference. And you know what I've discovered? It's not as much the good idea, but the hard work and good intentions of people that make a difference. Now, we're going to the World Finals in Dhaka, and it's hosted by the University of Asia Pacific, and it'll be on the 10th of November, and it's going to be a great competition. And one of the things that we always ask is for the host university and the community leaders to come together to figure out how to create some systems that last, that open doors of opportunity for people. And guess what they're doing? Well, it's the case that the Ministry of Digital Computing or Digital Economy, I think it is, are hosting a competition for high schoolers for young women. Just like the 2 that I have mentioned so far. And we're going to encourage full participation in that. Why? Because they also have the issue of making sure that there's enough opportunity, right? And making sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate. Now, I'm not a big believer in quota system, because quota system denies as well as awards. What I am a big believer is ample opportunity. I don't want to see a single person turned away from the opportunity they want to pursue. And I want them encouraged to the point that they're making the decision, not somebody else. Yeah. Now, there's another thing that they're doing that's even cooler, and that is they're going to offer basic programming courses to preteens, 15 million of them, and offer algorithmics in high school. Of course, algorithmic programming. You know, just because you see, the most valuable resource in the world today, okay, are people who can solve problems for people. And Bangladesh has a lot of well-motivated people. So we're very excited about what they're doing. They're also doing what they call digital Bangladesh. I'm going to throw something out to you because you might be surprised about this. Again, remember, I still do a little bit on the pharmaceutical side, and I did get sort of pulled back into this world of of epidemics and so forth back in 20. So what is the single greatest risk factor, okay, in the United States for being hospitalized for COVID?
I think, is it diabetes maybe, or?
Across the whole population.
Yeah.
Not having access to the internet.
I see. That's actually great. That's a very nice.
You ask why? Well, because some people can't afford it, right? They don't have access to information that we have. When I was a kid, I could ride my bicycle down to Auburn University's wonderful library at any given period of time. Okay, I could bug and might get tossed out. Anyone who was there, they put up with me, right? And that was miraculous. All right. Now I have an ancestor who graduated from Harvard in 1653. What? Yeah, because there's this guy named John Harvard. He had a library. He moved close to where he was. Okay. Now access to information, it has never been as great as it is today.
Exactly.
And internet, it opens that doors. The problem now, though, is that people have to be very, very careful about the information they get, because there's so much marketing and there is so much propaganda. And that ties back to my training, had I decided to take the military direction in my life. Black propaganda, gray propaganda, white propaganda. White propaganda is putting your best foot forward and everybody knows you got your other one. If it wasn't for white propaganda, I would have never been able to sell my wife on the idea of marriage. So I'm guilty of that. Right?
Great.
Black propaganda is a different matter. When you have a war, black propaganda is twisting everything you can, okay, to get people angry to enable you to fight the war, or fearful of you so that you can win the war. And unfortunately, what do you actually need during wartime? Peace.
Surely. Yeah.
Right. And so universities, the ICPC, are part of the humanitarian mission of building a better world by equipping the next generation to do precisely that, with the skill to do it, right, and the heart to do it, And so, so we're ready and we're operating and we're doing everything that we can to make sure that students can continue to compete. And that's what you're doing, Coach. Yeah. The ICPC is about the coaches of the world, okay, working with students. We just provide an extra infrastructure to it to make it cool.
Yeah, actually, let me ask you one question. By the way, so I think to the audience, we are essentially live at several venues.
Okay.
Like this, again, I mean, just with Professor Bill Pocher on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. If you have a question, I think it might be good if the YouTube would be the best, and Instagram, these two would be easier essentially for me to check and ask Professor Bill Pocher.
Oh, by the way, you did ask me though another question. Yeah. What's the greatest World Finals, okay, that you ever remember? And the answer to that is the one we're planning to have this year. There's nothing more exciting than what is to come and what people do to make that happen. And I've got to take my hat off to the University of Central Florida for hosting the North America Championship. And we're trying to have those everywhere in the 8 regions of the ICPC. And thanks to JetBrains and AWS and to Sigma, and thanks to NSA and DoD STEM for their support of the university and the students. It's really great to see the community pulling together, because we live in a challenging world and we need to keep pressing forward for the next generation. Okay.
Great. So, one actually, yeah, I think we mentioned some of the sponsors, and I think we are thankful of them because these are important for them.
Well, I couldn't mention all of the sponsors.
Yeah, but just I think the brief version. Yeah, there are lots of them over years, essentially.
Yeah, but if you don't say thank you, then you should never ask please, right?
Exactly.
Grandma's.
Yeah. So one question actually they asked on the, I think one of these chats, live chats. So did ICPC have done anything for this Ukraine war, and I mean anything from that one?
Oh. Well, that's an interesting situation. What I would do is to look up the ICPC Code of Ethics, okay, to understand who the ICPC is and to understand what we do. Now, every year over the last 33 years, there have been wars, civil wars, terrible situations on the planet that have affected ICPCers. However, this year, those are affecting most are those who are in North, or who are in ICPC Europe and in ICPC Northern Eurasia. Okay, I'm a war orphan. Okay, I have some understanding of what happens when life dysfunctions. Okay, there are 4,000 ICPCers students competing in Northern Eurasia and another 4,000 in Europe. Okay, and we're doing everything that we can to make sure that they have the experience that we're supposed to deliver. And we're encouraging on a private and personal level everything that people can possibly do, of course, within within their situation to deal with the circumstances that exist with the war in the Ukraine, of course. Okay, I'm going to tell you that ICPC universities have reached out to do some amazing things for refugees. Okay, in fact, we discussed, we could raise funds for this, but we actually decided to not. Well, who can raise funds for this? Well, there's a UN Commission on Refugees. If we took money from that, then we're taking it from the people who know actually how to help refugees. If we and what about the Red Cross and the other humanitarian programs that are trying to deal with that? So we try to be true to who we are, and in fact, our culture is pretty simple. I actually pulled up my list here so that I just happen to have it here. We promote regional integrity. We don't want a single soul to lose the opportunity, to represent their university, whether it's 50 years old or 800 years old, in competition and to meet their peers. You see, we promote regional integrity, provide global coordination. Our policy is keep it simple. We serve, we don't rule. Sometimes people ask me to do all kinds of things because I'm the executive director. I'm not a general. I am a servant of those who serve others. Okay. We have a policy of never making the same, never have the same reason for making the same mistake. We put people first. We're going to do everything that we possibly can to be as normal as we possibly can, to encourage people to participate and to support the community as they grapple with the challenges that they have. But one of the things that we aren't going to do is to weaponize the Icpc. Now, this is very hard to understand at times. I mean, I understand. It's very hard to understand, okay? But why? Once we have worked for 33 years to open the doors to allow people viewed as souls to fully participate in the Icpc. And it's been transformative. There have been 1,000 students who've competed at the World Finals, for instance, representing their universities from countries that are sometimes at war. Sometimes they have travel restrictions, and we've had presidents and prime ministers, kings, queens. We've had an ambassador fly to Beirut to take biometrics so that students from universities in Syria could compete in Porto. I probably shouldn't mention some of that, right? But the world, even when we're dysfunctioning, understands what's at stake if we lose a generation, if we lose the opportunity of evolving. You see, the bottom line is that universities are the global source of preserving knowledge, expanding knowledge for the benefit of the next generation, and encouraging them to build a better world than the one they inherit. And so that's what we do. Sometimes folks have said, well, you need to yell about this. When has yelling caused violence to stop? So excuse me as an old guy, you know, that maybe I don't have a lot of sense, but I'm going to put the life of a student, a faculty member, an institution, a sponsor, community leader who cares about the next generation first, above anything else. And but don't assume that I know what the solution is to that problem, or that I can address it any better than any other human being. What I can simply say is the Icpc is grandma's house. And come to grandma's house and you'll get goodwill, the golden rule, and unqualified affection, because you're part of the future of civilization. And I think that yeah,
I think, I mean, that's like a good, I mean, thing that focusing essentially currently, I mean, on the Icpc mission of, I mean, writing, having a fair programming and some accessible for anyone, essentially. That's the goal that you are doing. And of course, there are sometimes conflicting things. Is it like the game theory? It is like the zero-sum game, but sometime, I mean, hopefully sometime not zero-sum game, but sometime it can be zero-sum game, and there is one that you want to decide first, whether you want to have availability for everyone or not. I think that's the thing that you mentioned, the current mission of the
yeah, and let me just go through, and this is important because our goals, the reason we're able to maintain our focus is we're goal-centered, and we don't talk about anything except something that affects our goals, okay? And our goals are, and it says, decisions shall be governed by the following goals, okay? Attract as many students as possible. Attract as many colleges and universities as possible. Draw from as many geographical regions of the world as possible. Provide equitable access to the World Finals. Strive for competitive contests. Involve industry, community, and shine the spotlight on the students and maintain and support the university base. So that's what we're doing. But notice where the workshops are. The workshops are where they need to be. And we're doing all kinds of things that we can to encourage everyone in the community to meet the needs of this next generation right now, wherever they are. Okay, and let's not forget COVID. We've got real challenges on this world, that there are vast populations that are not protected as much as some other populations. And let's talk about food. Okay, when the world supply gets disrupted, whether it's natural or dysfunctional, okay, there are real people who are affected by that. So what I always suggest is that if you're angry, find something you can do for your neighbor and do that. And if it has to do with creating opportunity for others to compete in the ICPC, send a note to us, because if you're successful, we want that done everywhere, and we can put you together with other people who want to make that successful. Life is short, okay? Energy is available. Put it where it needs to be, and remember my dad's advice, okay? Which is to defend those who are in danger, aid those who are in need, and comfort those who are suffering. And I guess I'll add the last one was, and come back to your mother. Because some people are having to hear that right now. Okay.
Great. Okay, so I think we have done this thing. We have, I mean, some of the questions that we asked, I think Bill took time to answer that question. So coming back, I mean, to a bit more technical thing. So we talk about ICPC is the root of lots of these kinds of competitive programming. And I think I just mentioned for the audience that in case they don't know the exact style of it, there are 3 people that they are essentially working on with one computer for 5 hours, and they need to solve around something 12, 13 problems. And the person who is solving the best and get it, and if 2 people solve the same number of problems, the people who had less time, that person essentially has a higher rank. And if you submit any wrong solutions, then you will get some penalties. That's later on this IOI that we discussed. The IOI is again 5 hours, but two 5 hours individual competition for higher schoolers. ACM is for more like undergrad and early graduate students. And then after that, there are, so these are some of these kinds of competitive programming. And after that, there are lots of other type of competitive programming that has been essentially generated, like Google Code Jam, Top Coders, others. And actually, more importantly, nowadays it is interesting. There are like the people are going to, I think, several websites that are there, like Geek for Geeks. I forgot all the names essentially. That anyone who wants to hire in top companies like Google, Facebook, etc., they actually need to solve this kind of algorithmic problems, because these are the hardest problems that the interviewer asks, and the people took time to actually do these things. So if you don't do it essentially early in life, if later you want to go a good tech company, still you need to do it. Like almost everywhere they are asking this question. So it's better to start sooner. Now, how do you essentially, like as I mentioned, this Google Code Jam and Top Coders and others, how do you compare this, I mean, and several other things that are essentially generated with ICPC? Why ICPC is still the best place essentially in the world to do this kind of competitive programming?
Well, here's the thing. What makes civilization grand? Diversity, opportunity. Okay, I love the fact that Google is doing their competition, and so is Facebook, and Yandex has competitions. Lots of companies have competitions. Why? Because they know that for brains to fully develop, they need to be used, right? And what's the old saying, that a knife can get only as sharp as as the steel that is strapped on or something. I don't know. I'm sure. But the bottom line is that we're delighted that all of the competitions in the world are attracting students to participate. Now, what do I mean by student? Well, how old am I? Do you remember?
Yeah, you might 73.
I'm still a student. When did I stop being a student? Okay.
I think, yeah.
Right. And I've got a 2-year-old grandchild, who's a student, and an almost 5-year-old, and a 10, and an 8-year-old, and a 10-year-old, and a 24-year-old. You see, we always want to be students. We always want to be learning and exploring. And so the greater the variety of opportunities, the better. The bottom line is that only a small number of human beings on the planet ever was exposed to higher levels of mathematics and algorithmics. Okay, does that mean they're not smart? Of course they're smart. They're human beings, for crying out loud, right? But once your eyes are open to certain patterns, okay, certain processes, certain solutions, then you craft the solution to your problems, knowing that could actually be done, right? And so that's part of what is going on there. The other is, if a person has mastered the basic algorithms of data structures or an algorithms course, they've worked really hard. That they have persevered through that, and so that they have determination. And if they work on teams, that they can work on teams. By the way, do you know why the ICPC is 5 hours? Well, it used to be 6 hours. And on key punch machines, the first problems didn't come in until 4.5 hours after the contest.
I see.
Now the problems come in 4.5 minutes after the start of the contest.
Yeah,
right?
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and we made it 5 hours because we were killing our judges to try to keep up with, to produce a problem set that has some easy, medium, difficult problems. And our goal is that every problem gets solved. No team solves them all, right?
Yeah.
But every team solves some, right? So that's it. I do want to tell you one story though, and I won't, I'm at the South California competition, and a young man is there, and I'm looking at him, and I know I've seen him at a World Finals, but I can't remember which one. And I went up to him, and yes, we had met, and he told me the World Finals he was at, and I asked him what he was doing. He said he was unemployed.
Oh.
Now, this is weird because this is the first unemployed person I've ever met at ICPC. I said, unemployed? He says, yeah. He says, well, what did you do after the World Finals? He says, well, I knew I wasn't the best student there, so I connected up to several others, and we started a .com business, and we sold it for $900 million. And I decided I would just take off and see the world for a year, and I'm bored stiff. I can't stand it anymore. So I thought I'd come over here and see if I could find some bright kids and start another competition.
I see. So that's one of the best type of essentially unemployed, I will say.
Yeah, so it's okay if you're unemployed that way.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
One of them right now is a monk. I think that's cool. That they followed their passion, and I'll guarantee you they'll be the best monk ever. And that's really what I care about. I want to see students have energy, investment. I know they're going to slip and fall, but I also want them to be in an environment where there are people who'll lend a hand to get folks going again, right?
Yeah, actually, I mean, this is some of the things that I will mention to my PhD students and like even undergrad. So one, I mean, like, of course, I mean, I'm working on the algorithms and theory. Of course, I'm doing some practical stuff and more system stuff, but my main papers essentially in the theory and algorithm. And I always say this is actually very important because the algorithm is the part that you need to do the math thinking. And this thinking is the one that you are just using sometime in the problem solving, but you can use it in your life. Like any place, anything that you want to do it, also you should use it. So that in some sense, that's like somehow very close to your life. And they mentioned actually to some of them that if you are a very good researcher, you should be also like a good, like have lots of ideas in your life, and your life should be not mess essentially. Should have also very good life as well, because you can use the same thinking there as well. Everyone in some sense is the algorithm. That's like you want to solve some problem either in your life or for ICPC or for any of these programs. You need to think and find a way to solve it. Sometimes you will write the program. Sometimes you need to do it through communication with the people, and I mean, make it essentially like a company happens. In some sense, you're writing program as well.
Yeah, and I also say this: if you're going to learn something, learn to teach it to others. Okay,
very important.
Because if you can teach other people, then you can build a community and you can be more valuable to others. And you know what the hardest thing to teach an algorithm to is? A computer. They are really dumb.
Exactly.
Right? You know, so when you're programming, you're actually teaching, explaining within the context of the virtual machine what you'd like it to do. And when you see it faithfully execute, there's this, listen, you actually were the teacher of all teachers. You got the dumbest possible thing to faithfully execute what you asked it to do. And it can then do that for the remainder of its life. You know,
actually, I mean, the dumb part, you are completely right. I want to add, actually, we had one of these other lives, and one person doing things IOI and this ACM ICPC programming, he was involved in that and mentioned that one of the things that these competitions are very successful because of the fairness. So this dumbness of the computer is maybe it's dumb, but also it's fair. It, like when you write a program, if I write it, or like, I don't know, this other celebrity writes, or I don't know, this person with the wealth write it, answers the same thing. If it is wrong, it gives wrong answer. If it is correct, it gives you the correct answer. I think that, and also, of course, I mean, this way of selections in all these competitions generally are very fair. You will get it because you are good at it. You cannot just get it because your friend essentially or your father had something, then you can get it. You know, I mean, you may go to some steps, but the later steps, you need to be good at it. And in that sense, this fairness also is very important things that actually helps a lot for these competitions. And also, this is some property of computer that these are fair in some sense.
But it also needs to be a property of people. You know, if the ICPC didn't stay within its boundaries for the last 32 years, then the 1,000 kids who participated wouldn't have participated, and the rest of the people wouldn't trust us. Who would trust? You know, what if we decided we're not going to, we're angry about X, Y, or Z, and we're not going to let persons that have certain attributes participate? Okay, what if we decided that we didn't want you to participate if you were from a city that had a particular rule? How am I ever going to explain that to my grandchildren?
Yeah, I mean, I can actually I'm witness of that. So the time actually I mentioned, 1999, I was in Sharif University in Iran. And of course, there were lots of sanctions there. I remember that, I mean, like getting some, like even monies to participate in the contest was not easy, but still we could participate. And I think that was important because that was like the way that I could essentially evolve myself in a better shape. And then later I will continue. I mean, like I got my PhD at MIT and then continued to be the coach and like University of Maryland for, I don't know, now 13 years. So that's a very important thing, that this kind of fairness and yeah.
You are that soul. You know, I didn't even know that until we met. So perhaps I could tell you how we got that done.
Yeah, so that would be great. I mean, like that.
But I will tell you that a friend of mine was a friend of the Secretary of State of the United States. And we reached out about fairness. And the President of the United States at that time said, yes, we need to be fair. And they actually changed the rules to make sure that the students could compete, even though there were problems in those
countries. Yeah, so these are very important.
States. And we have been able to do that because there are people of goodwill everywhere. Let me tell you, it's not easy to find yourself responsible for a community during good times, to say nothing about bad times, right? So one of the things that I'm sort of a chaplain. If you come to me and you've got some kind of a challenge and then sometimes I'm able to help a little bit because I'm not of that world. I'm of the world of the universities of the world, evolving civilizations and souls to become better neighbors and to become engaged in building a better world. And some people say, well, that's utopian. Well, okay. But I will also say this. That the path to greatness just always seems to end in ruin. But the path to goodness endures forever. It's just we have to pave it a block at a time. And that's what you're doing with your students. You're paving the way. You're setting an example for that. And then they, in kind, do the same thing. A college professor isn't a college professor because we know the answers. We're college professors because we want you to ask the right questions. And the question I want all people and all of our students to ask is, don't we want to be happy? Don't we want our neighbors to be happy? Don't we want to be part of peace and prosperity for our community and for the future? And if we pour our energy into that, okay, look behind me.
Yeah, that would we have lots of flowers essentially. Great. So I think you mentioned actually some of the also memories about this contest. Any interesting memories that you want to share, essentially, like different years? So for how many years we are like it is internationally? I think for a few years it was more US universities.
Oh, okay,
and then it became
so we really started pushing. We always had. If you'll notice, the regions in the ICPC are based on geographic regions, not on national boundaries, because those change and it becomes very complicated. And they overlap. We factor the world, we don't partition it, you know? So that way, all universities have an opportunity to compete. And sometimes you might be closer to compete in one location in another. So,
yes.
So regions are about inviting people to participate.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry. I guess I've had a senior amendment. No, repeat your question again.
Yeah. So the question is that, I mean, I think when did you? So when it became more international, and any good memories about this competition?
Oh, absolutely. Well, it became intention. It was international from the start because we had teams from both Canada, the United States, and very often we had a team from the Netherlands too. However. And ACM, by the way, join ACM if you're a computer scientist or computer engineer. It's a great organization. I have to put that in because so many of us on the Icpc Foundation board are ACMers. Okay, but all institutions have a purpose and a focus, and those will determine boundaries. So, for instance, ACM in the United States plays a very, very important role in advising government, and in other places it does similar sorts of things. And it's an umbrella to all the SIGs. It plays a huge role in publications and things of that variety. The ICPC community, though, is huge and is focused on its mission, and together the variety works very, very effectively. But in order, what we really did in the late 80s, as the world was opening up, you see, and the Iron Curtain was coming down, okay, is that we intentionally said, we want a competition, okay? There's a competition among the universities of the world. And we wanted to have those doors open. And one of the exciting things that occurred, and I was at the regional when it occurred, is a team showed up that had hitchhiked from Warsaw to compete in the regional in Europe. So we started the European competitions. And what about the Asia competitions? How wonderful to have those competitions open up and be so successful, you know, in Beijing and in Shanghai and in Taipei and Seoul and Pyongyang and all over the world where people dream of living in a better world. And I can't help but maybe impose upon the world my grandma's house model. Okay, and just forgive me for that. But it's just exciting to see that. And what we did is that every opportunity that we could, where we found the entrance, we built that. And we had Vladimir Parfenov, who was a champion of making the competition work, you know, in the Russian, what became the Russian Federation, you know. I could tell you actually how the internet connected up countries because it was the academics who did that, right? And all I can say is that we went all in, that we would not discriminate or embarrass anyone, okay, in the ICPC. We're not part of that. We don't discriminate by gender. We don't discriminate by ethnic group or by religion or by nationality. We don't do that because we're a competition among the universities of the world, and we encourage the universities of the world, you know, to also remember who we are. Because that's another problem institutionally. Universities everywhere have been so successful with so many different metrics, we could actually forget who we are and why we exist.
Great.
And what we do is we exist, right, to evolve humanity and to help that next generation not only build a better world, but want to. So that's what we do.
Great. So, actually, another question that also, I mean, I think some of the people also ask.
Okay.
Yeah. So, this one actually, I had it also this question. So this ICPC, I mean, I think to just again explain to the people, I mean, you actually mentioned very nicely. Some of this I didn't know, like why 3 people, not 2 or 4 or 1, and why 5 hours and. Like I think 5 hours actually became like, even I think IUI probably got the 5 hours from ICPC as well. So the other question is that, I mean, the style of the problem. So there are, like at the ICPC, there are this kind of greedy algorithms, dynamic programming, geometric problems, simulations, branch and bound. These are the things actually there was discussion even is in NAC just a week ago. And so that's, however, the algorithm were developed more than this, like dynamic programming. Still, I'm publishing some papers on dynamic programming for string matching for some advanced setting. But of course, there are some other things like approximation algorithms, like fixed parameter algorithms. For example, IUI, I think they consider this one, that this particular case that you may have some problems that you may not get the exact solution, but as long as you are 10% of the optimum, you are fine essentially. Or like you may consider some other things. Nowadays, I think there is a streaming algorithm that you may have not that much memory or these things. This type of things has not been added to ICPC, while some other things, like for example, Google Code Jam or other, they have even some special things. They have some special optimization things. I mean, there are, of course, one question is that should we bring new competitions with these things, some of them like Google Broad or others, or can we add some of them to ICPC as well? So
that's an interesting thing. It's it's sort of like chess. You know, if you change the rules too much, then then people feel disappointed because they spent so much time and investment to become very, very good, based on an 8x8 array, right, with pieces that had certain kinds of properties and so forth. Now, the ICPC, we have such faithful participants that they don't want a lot of change, but we introduce it anyway. So if you actually look at the history of use of programming tools, you'll find that it first started being adopted in the ICPC, and we did that purposely. The object-oriented tools we did, and the way that we introduced new problem types is through challenges. So we had the ICPC visual challenge to do visual problems. We had the ICPC game challenge with IBM, game development challenge. We had an ICPC challenge with Huawei, which dealt with networking problems. And yes, the difference in performance worked. So at every World Finals, we have a different challenge that introduces a new problem set. Did you know that with IBM Quantum, we had the ICPC Quantum Challenge powered by IBM Quantum? And so we offered tutorials so that you could learn about quantum computing, and you actually could run your programs on some of the great IBM quantum systems that are out there. So one of the things that we love to do is to have companies that or researchers who are doing work. How about the parallel challenge? Do you remember Blue Jeans, the computer that was used to beat Kasparov in chess?
Yes, I remember, yes.
IBM flew it to a version of it to Shanghai so that we could do the ICPC parallel challenge there. You see, so we do that, and one of the things the foundation's wanting to do is this. We've done lots of cool challenges, but we haven't been able to scale them up to make them available for everybody. It's primarily been available only for the world finalists and maybe for the region champions now that we're building the region champions out. But that's one of the things that we want to make happen. And when we make those happen, we make them available for everyone. Now, the other thing that we run into is this. JetBrains is the global tool sponsor, and we make all of their tools available to participants of the ICPC. And so there was a request to be able to use some other programming languages that they had available at the World Finals, and we're glad to do that. I'm drifting a little bit. Bottom line is this. What we have tried to do is slowly introduce additional problems, and we have had World Finals problems in which you check the answer, but you also had to check the code. We have had World Finals problems where you had to beat the judges, right? Your algorithm simply had to do better than the judges did. In fact, I know of one problem that has not been solved in closed ordered form. And if you did, you'd probably get your PhD. We could talk about that at a later time. What I would do is this. You've got some really good ideas as a coach about problems that'll be in the ICPC. And I want you to send a note to manager@icpc.global. Manager@icpc.global, because you should be one of the judges. See, the best judges in the world are coaches and the contestants that have performed very, very well in the world. When you mentioned, the Google Jam, right, and the Hacker Cup, it turns out that I believe there are judges for both of those that were actually world finalists from University of Central Florida. In fact, one of them did a telecast from the North America Championship. So I call on all you youngsters. Did you know you're a youngster? I mean, for me, I'm 73, right? To pitch those in. And we're also going to resurrect the problem archive that we have. COVID hit everybody. We had to we had to take our courses online. We had to do lots of things in a very short period of time. But the benefit of it is that we now have that interest in technology to move forward. We're also going to do some model curriculum, okay, in competitive programming, because we think that's not just valuable for the universities, but that's valuable for everybody. So we have the ICPC University Commons program. Probably we'll start calling it ICPC Commons program. So what's the Commons idea? Well, in university, going to the lecture is helpful, but I hate to say it, I learned a lot more from other sources, partly because I had a problem of falling asleep during lectures. See, as I pay close attention to something, my body starts shutting down. I go into, almost a trance-like state, On the other hand, nothing develops your problem-solving ability more than learning how to listen.
Yeah. So actually, this thing that you mentioned about this other Google Code Jam or others, like it was, I think it was a few years ago. So among the 8 people who actually came to DC, I think that was, to DC to do the world final for, I think, the optimization version of that. 2 people, that was interesting. Like one of these, among the person who got the rank 3 actually was my postdoc, and the person who got rank 5 actually was my master student. And both they were ICPC people essentially. So, and this is like, again, because I'm like working with lots of my students, and like, of course, as a coach or also as my PhD students, I'm working with these guys. So surely, these people who are working in ICPC, they are also great in other competitions. I think the main reason, and I completely agree, so you can consider the whole contest as the chess. Who is the, you can say, why chess? Why we can have 8 by 8? Why not 10 by 10 or something like this? That's one thing. But yes, and I think you can see the whole contest as like some kind of chess. But that was interesting. I didn't know, for example, the example that you mentioned, that you could just beat the judge's solution and you got the thing. I didn't know about that one. But surely I think adding such kind of things would be interesting, but of course it needs a lot of thinking, because even approximation algorithms that we talk about it, like you talk about 2 approximation. If you just consider 2 approximation, maybe if you just do some kind of heuristic, you can be much better than the best 2 approximation that is possible for that. So there is some more thinking needed. But I'm very happy that actually you encourage, of course, not me, anyone else who can, just possibly consider this one and adding that. The reason that I have mentioned that, because I think the fact that, ICPC essentially taught the whole world, essentially, I will say, about the more competitive programming. And again, as I mentioned, even now at the interviews, you need to do this type of programs. So it's not the case that I don't want to do IOI or ICPC. No, later on, if you want to go computer science, if you want to get the job in tech companies, lots of them, they have this type of problem at the different levels. Maybe the Google ones are harder. I don't know, maybe some other company is a bit like maybe less intense problems or easier problems, but anyhow, you need to solve them such that you can get a job. But at the same time, I think it would be good to, this is actually coming to my next question. The question is that should we have camps for ICPC? So we have this one for IOI. I can tell you, for example, in Iran, we had more than 1 year. I can say that like in the whole undergrad, I didn't learn anything, because everything that I learned, it was that 1 year camp that I had it for IOI. And of course, then later we use that knowledge for ICPC, etc. Nowadays, there are some camps, training camps for ICPC, like a week camp. And actually, the teams mentioned that those that are going to those camps, actually, they are very successful. So the question is that, should we have, because this is also this concept of fairness that you mentioned. Some people that they don't have that much access to essentially ICPC camps, they may not do that great comparing to those that they are going to those camps. We had this issue also about, for example, IOI in Iran, for example, that they're also in the selection at the beginning, it was very natural, very organic. The people who are good and learn, they will come in. But then there are some classes, some specific classes for those people, and those people usually doing much better. So this is the concept of fairness. One thing that this can help about is kind of adding more approximation algorithm, I don't know, fixed parameter algorithm, streaming algorithm, make it a bit wider such that you cannot necessarily be master of everything. You really need to be organically well. So that was the idea there. And essentially this question of this ICPC camps, I think that should we have ICPC camps? How long should be there? I think that's the thing that you want. Does it have any issues with the fairness?
Yes, absolutely. There are camps for different purposes. For instance, there's a Petrosavos camp that was operated for many times, and actually ICPC itself, the foundation, is encouraging camps without camps that don't cost. We're helping establish standard curricula for camps, right? But even with the North America Championship, UCF conducted a programming camp for 2 days. A week is even better. Glenn Downing is working on some standard curricula at the University of Texas. You might check with Glenn. There are efforts, at University of Peking, there are camps and efforts that we have. So we're pushing forward along this line. And what we're realizing with the ICPC Foundation is that we need to go ahead and build an endowment to have a sustained effort to not only continue all of the registrar information and the problem sets associated with the competition, but also to make sure that we have an umbrella that's inclusive of people who are actually building the educational models for competitive programming, simply because those need to be available to grow and to be accessible not only horizontally among age groups, but in terms of depth. There's really no reason why some kids at age 6 and 7 and 8 years old, can't begin seeing the world through algorithmic lens. One of the interesting things that happened when we were at Stockholm, which was a great World Finals where we used every venue of Nobel history for the ICPC. KTH was the host, IBM our sponsor then, was that we had a little glitch in awards, and I asked, how many of you have a music background? Okay, that is, you were in an orchestra, you were in a band, okay, you sang in a choir when you were in high school. 75%. Now you have to understand you're dealing with a global community, and many countries cause specialization to occur very early in their life, so they might not have had that opportunity. You see, when you compose an algorithm, a program, it's just like composing music. It happens in time. When you instrument with different instruments, well, that's multi-threaded programming. Okay, now if Mozart could do that at 4, certainly my grandchild, who's 2, could do it at 4. I'm a grandparent, I'm proud of my kids, but I want them to have the opportunity to find out how they can continue to learn, how they can find their talent, and how they can get excited about life, and how they can make a difference. What I do know is this: the questions that we ask frame how we invest our lives. And if right now you're not framing your life to be moving forward, okay, that's the reason why you're not moving forward. Now, if I go out to West Texas and visit my daughter Karen out at Midland, it's sort of dusty, and I'm in an old truck, okay, on a dusty road. I need to have mirrors to see what's behind me, okay? But I need a great big windshield to see what's in front of me. And I need to be heading somewhere. Now, I will tell you that if you look in the rearview mirror and you see some dust, that's because you're moving. Okay? Don't be so concerned about the precision with which you see the past. Okay? Keep your eyes on the road. Keep your mind on successfully piloting to your final destination. But don't have a final destination, for crying out loud. Yeah, have several possibilities, right?
I always say, I mean, aim high, essentially. That's it, like the thing that I mentioned. So if you aim high to here, you may not reach there, but you may come here, essentially. But
that's right.
They aim high means aiming like in different areas that also considered somehow the aim high. But if you have the aim here, then you may reach there, but you didn't do that much, essentially. Always aim high as much as possible, essentially, even if you don't reach there.
And you can learn. Now, in the U.S. Air Force ROTC courses, and from my father, I learned that if you plan, you need to have 2 ways of accomplishing the mission, all right? A third alternative, all right? And a fallback position. Got it?
Yeah.
And that's actually how we plan out programming contests, except now with COVID, we actually have to have multiple plans and checkpoints to determine what we can do, when we can do it, because, you know, COVID and the various rule changes that occur in the world that we must comply with, you know, can require us to do different kinds of things. But those are really good ideas. And I'll share something that Dad told me not to share. Sorry, Dad. And that is, have the 5th one too, but don't tell anybody what that is. Okay? Because the most important thing for you to do is endure. And let me sort of finalize about enlightenment. I had the benefit of growing up in a principle-based family, okay? I had to learn how to think because my father was in critical condition as a result of his injuries. And so he wanted me to think through things. And that's one of the reasons why we have this very simple piece of paper, which is our code of ethics, which is really our model for working together. That's really what it is.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to add.
But hold on just a second.
Go ahead.
But here's an ancient thing to remember. It's called the 7 lights of enlightenment. The 3 greater lights, okay, are called the great pillars of institution or community, okay? Universities, in fact. And they are strength, beauty, and wisdom. And what we want to do is to make sure that those are always present in everything that we do. And the 4 lesser lights, not because they're less important, but generally the 3 are here and the 4 down here, are the cardinal virtues. And I don't hear these terms as much, and they need to be said. First, there is fortitude to endure. There is temperance, okay, to welcome and accept. There's prudence so that you're prosperous. And there's justice to balance. And if you keep those 4 things in mind as a community, then you can work harmoniously together. You won't let each other down, or if you do, it won't be intentional and everybody will simply adjust. That's what justice is. Justice is not punishment. Justice is making just, readjusting, making the square deal happen. So just remember those: fortitude, right? And what? Temperance, is that right? Okay, and prudence and justice, okay? Those, how you live, and the pillars that you have, what you care for, beauty, strength, and wisdom, and you can build yourself up to be a better person, your community, your friends, you can make a difference. But be patient. And
yeah.
that's just,
So actually, I wanted to add something about the complement of that. I don't know, how do you put it in one of these 7 rules essentially about you? So one of the things that I have seen about you, I think I have not seen like for example in IOI or other type of conference that I seen essentially, like you was one of the, I think, the great founder of these things. That I can say actually, and I think I will encourage the people. I always see that you will come, you will go and talk with any individual teams, any individual people. I think that's one of the great things that I have, seen about you, that make the whole thing very accessible and talk, great extent with the people. I think we had actually quite a bit of in different years, we had quite a bit of maybe 2 hours essentially just discussing with Bill about some particular issue. And I think that's one of the important, characteristics that you have it, and I really enjoyed it. I really encourage also the people to have this other one. I don't know how do you put it in among these 7 rules, but that's one of the other great things that I have seen. Be down to earth and try to talk with all people. I think that the people will enjoy that.
Well, I enjoy that because it's a great privilege for me to meet other people who are on the path to goodness and are paving it faster than it's ever been phased in human times. I guess if you ask, about the principles and so forth, why don't I just mention this? If something has lasted for a couple of thousand years and people think that it's important, it's probably important. Okay. Now, it may not be applicable at the moment, but there's one thing that regardless of what's happening, that I like to remember, and it's how I readjust, okay, in life. And that is that there was this fellow named Paul, and about 2,000 years ago, he wrote a letter. And in that letter, he said that love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It's not proud. Okay. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. And that's from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, starting in verse 4. And when I hear those words, and they're worth committing to your mind and to your heart, think about the problems that disappear. And what remains are the problems that we need to work on with all of our hearts together. And so I'm just an old Texan who's been very blessed with a great education, great friends, right? And technology that allows my 2-week blue bonnets to be in the background as long as I want and whenever I want it, And so if I'm providing some service, that's great. But the bottom line is that every person that I've met has had an impact on me. Okay. So I'm just a bee, buzzing around all those wonderful blue bonnets out there. And insofar as I can do some help, I do. But I will tell you, I don't have to do much, because people who are attracted to the ICPC are people who care about other people.
Great. good. Like a few, like a two, maybe just a short answer. So, yeah.
I'll try. Okay.
Yeah, I enjoy essentially adjustments. I mean, from your time, I enjoy actually talking with you all the time. So, so one thing, if time flies back, is there anything that you have done differently for ICPC, like as an experience that for the future the people want to consider it?
Sure, of course. I would have loved better. Okay, but I don't regret it. When we don't succeed, don't we learn the value of success? Right? So the way you get better at something is to recognize how you could go about being better. Anything else? I don't know. I've been so lucky. I would be risking being struck by lightning, okay, if I complained about my life. But I will tell you one thing, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. In 1969, I heard Marcia's voice. And 69 was a really tough year for me. And it was beautiful. And it took me a number of months to convince her to be my wife. But it did. And that changed my life entirely, because that put me on a trajectory of helping folks get ahead rather than getting even. And that makes all the difference.
Yeah. So I think I should say, I mean, hi to Marcia. I think I enjoyed actually communicating with her. Also, like lots of ICPC things a lot. So that's also, you mentioned her name. I should also say hi to her. So but what about ICPC? Is there any particular thing in ICPC that you change it? Like you have been essentially executive director of that for the past more than 35 years. Is there anything that you think that it was something that if you have changed it early in life of ICPC that was much better?
Interesting. I don't know, ICPC being a community of souls, of people. By the way, when I use souls, I use it like T.S. Eliot. That is a person with a mind and able to make choices and to plot a course in life. Okay. I don't know. That sort of fits in the rear view mirror part. But let me tell you what happens, okay? Time and time again, people figure out how to do things better. And my number one job is to not get in the way, right? And if I see that there's a little crack or some problem or something like that, and if I can help a little bit, I do. But the ICPC community is the community's community. And it's my job not to abuse that. Sometimes people say, well, Bill, you ought to say this, you ought to say that. I can't. My moral basis is that if I were to use the community, which is the invention of so many souls, for my personal use, then I would abuse all of those souls. And that's why we have Bill's rules of not misbehaving. Which makes, and think about that. If you turn out to have been born in an environment in which the rules changed every month, like with me, and you had to adapt, right? Then you needed to have a center in your life. And so where did these things come from? Well, they're thousands of years old. Serve, don't rule. I mean, for crying out loud, are you kidding me? Every great society has these ideas. It's just that we don't always follow them when we ought to, So I would say, if my time were up tomorrow, okay, I don't have regrets. I'm certainly not an all A student of life.
But you don't have, I mean, you try your best, essentially.
Well, not always. You see, the key is that sometimes life deals you crucibles, really difficult situations, okay? And the important thing to do is to get out of them and then become aware of them and let them motivate you to help. You see, because you, after going through a crucible, can help others who are experiencing those same things. Everything that happens to you can become a motivator for you to live a life in which you don't claim to have the answers. You're in search of the great questions of life, and to be aware of the need. I could share examples of very simple things that made huge differences in life, and very huge things that made no difference at all. You know, so be in the moment, in the present, okay, and be moving. Okay, and don't worry about the dust. Okay,
yeah,
just keep moving, and
hopefully not much regret that you have it at the end.
Yeah. And I don't anticipate, disappearing. I'm going to try to be like my old second great granddad and hang in here for a while to be more valuable, if nothing more, just to encourage, folks. And thank you for coaching, by the way. I actually loved coaching. What's really strange is that all of the things I really like to do, I sort of gave up because I was pretty good at not interfering with people.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's actually one of the main properties of a good manager, because I think that is one of the most important things, that you don't want to do that much micromanagement. You want to let the people essentially.
Well, that's so funny that you mention it, because one of the criteria that I espoused for our department was never hire someone who needs to be managed. Yeah. It's, right? Now we do need to coordinate our efforts every so often, right? But that's what's great about the ICPC. Nobody needs to be managed. And everybody's better.
Like one other question I think that is important. You mentioned about this idea about, I think, like, I can also confess, like 1999, we were hearing more like the ACM competitions. Then, of course, I mean, we've talked about ACM, ICPC, and I think it's 2018 or something like this, that like there was this issue. You mentioned essentially the reason that ACM
That was me. I named it the ACM ICPC. Yeah. And that's because I love ACM. It has a family relationship, and we also help recruit students to go into ACM. ACM is a great big umbrella, though, right? And ICPC is based on a service academic model tenure. Now, you might not be doing the same thing from time to time. So our way of doing things is to plod forward with evolution within our zone. ACM is a wonderful umbrella, but sometimes they just embrace this, sometimes they embrace that, and so it's also the case that that one of the challenges that you run into is rules. We're principle based, right? Something goes wrong and somebody says, I know exactly what we need to do. Says what? We need to have a rule against that. Oh my gosh. You can then get so many rules against something that you actually violate the very principles of the organization. Yeah. And every group faces that. By the way, I'm not saying ACM does that, but the more diverse the focus is, then the more challenging you run into. So when Joe de Blasi was executive director of the ACM, and he and I are great friends, and he was on, and Joe passed away not long ago. You might look up the memorial I wrote for him, because he was a great friend. We could not have evolved as much or as quickly without that help, and we'll be eternally grateful for that. But to go to 111 countries, right, and to have a completely open door policy really requires you to plow your own furrow, okay, and especially now with a period in which the functioning of the world is so challenging, because with the coming of the digital millennia, so many things are possible, but so many things get messed up when there are competing restrictions from one location to another. I mean, just simple registration has to agree with the EU laws, with the US laws. People disagree about this, disagree about that. And we've tried to remain really, really simple, so this was the right thing for us to do. And as a result, we're much stronger than we were in our mission to empower people based on the principle of locality. So what is the ICPC at the University of Maryland? Well, you are, right? The students are. Nobody needs another manager, right? But having some more grandmas and grandpas, and even if you're 5 years old, it's sort of nice to have on occasion.
That you will consider ACM as a grandma or grandpa for them. So one other question also, about the ICPC Foundation. Do you want to tell a little bit? Do you get donations or other things? So how is it going about that, essentially?
Yes, we do. We're extremely lightweight, but what we've realized is that we need to beef up, right? And why? Because we've done a lot of what I call catalytic funding, and we do it in secret because we don't have the money to meet everybody's desires, but we can meet some specific needs. But now what we need to do is we need to share how to do some things, right? So a lot of times what we do roughly 10 times as much good indirectly as we do directly. So for instance, if we can get an entity to buy in to do so-and-so and so-and-so, and we recruit help and they worry about paying for it and the laws and things of that variety, we're delighted to do that. So we look at ourselves as the umbrella for the ICPC community that operates under the auspices of the Icpc Foundation, and we do the World Finals host agreements and things of this variety. We've done no contracting; that's way too complicated. But we do have sponsor agreements; those are donations. And I'm looking at it, and my friends are telling me, Bill, we've got to have some. We need to have an endowment so that we have sustained effort, because we're a little on the fragile side. So we're just going to do that.
Yeah. I think, some of these people that you mentioned, those unemployed person,
well,
so they surely they can, help you. I think that's a great, just giving back essentially when you had the opportunity to use it.
Yeah, I did a back of the envelope calculation, and I think that ICPCers and their friends probably contribute several $1 trillion to the budget every year. So there's no question about that. It's just, my concern was always that if we attract too much capital, we'll attract the wrong reasons to do things. But aren't all great institutions, don't they have an endowment, or don't they have, the mechanism of sustaining themselves? So yeah, we're going to do that. And we do have great friends. We just need to be able to do it in such a way that we can enable everybody to participate, and in fact, that may be what we end up doing with ICPC Global Headquarters. We also have some headquarters units in other areas because we need to be, it's a strange thing. We may have a sponsor that is the greatest in the world within their economic zone, and we know they're not only completely trustworthy, but they have a great heart. Okay, but over here, well, somebody's saying nasty things about them, right? Yeah. Because of some other reasons. However, over there, we've got some great sponsors, but over here, so one of the big problems in the world right now is that gossip and being judgmental has become a privilege of everyone, but frankly, it's counterproductive, right? So we're trying to figure out how to use that principle of locality so that we're strong and that we can bring people together. Because that's the other thing that we want to see too. Yeah. Not only do we want to bring souls together, but we want to bring universities together, which we do, yeah. And we want to bring sponsors together, which is harder, but we do.
Yeah, completely understand. So in some sense, it's some kind of distributed way of sponsors, but they can essentially they can support different regions because of different political reasons or something like this. Well, that can work well actually for ICPC, and everyone is happy essentially.
Yes, and not only that, but we do where if they're doing something for students, if they're doing something for society that's within our community grasp, we want to figure out how we can help that happen even better. So we're of the ICPC notion that competing together for the benefit of community and for your neighbor, well, it doesn't get any better than that, right? And it's completely in harmony with that beautiful description of what love is that Paul shared with us thousands of years ago. And it's so beautiful that people have preserved it even to today.
Yeah. So let me ask, I mean, that's almost near to end, I think, then get a lot of your time and I think good advice. So how do you see, I mean, what are your, what is your vision? Hopefully, I mean, you will be alive for next 50 years of ICPC, 50 years from now. I mean, that's actually the one that, for example, at the RoboCup, they had it. When I was participated in RoboCup, this is again, some soccer between robots. In year, I think the time that I started, the idea is that at 2050, the best robotic team actually can beat the world final champion at that year, like the human ones. So they can beat them. So what is your vision like for the next 50 years of ICPC? Is there any particular thing that you like happen? I mean, you can even mention about World Horses. Yeah.
Yeah, I will tell you that right off the bat. Yeah. Okay, my vision is that everybody wants to be happy and they want their neighbors to be happy too. And they do whatever is necessary to equip themselves to continue to evolve in that direction. Okay. And it's really that simple, So if I have a vision, it's a vision for the souls of this community, for the individuals, for the people who are making choices to make good choices. And it's okay to make bad choices. I made bad choices, for crying out loud. Okay. However, I always tried to fall forward and I always had great friends who helped me get back up. Okay. So you can do that. And the other thing is don't make a decision at night. Wait until the morning. Okay. Wait until you can see the daisies, if you would, or in Texas, the bluebonnets. Okay. Yeah.
Actually, I mentioned also the same thing. Whenever, I said that if you are happy, you want to make something that you can make the people, maybe I will maybe add to your thing that if you want to make some decision that you will make some person happy at night, maybe that's a good decision. You can make it. But I mean, if there is something that there is some trade-off, maybe at least wait until the morning. That's like the maybe some more advanced version of the things. Maybe until the morning you can, yeah.
In 50 years, I want Elon Musk at age 100 to be a sponsor for the Mars teams.
Yeah, I completely, yeah. Yeah, that would be actually one of the interesting things that, I mean, we can go there. Surely it's like, I think that's like him and Jeff Bezos, that's their current thing that they go to Mars. So hopefully maybe we have the people from Mars that are participating in ICPC as well. And great. So I think that's about this one. And yeah, I think you mentioned, I think we asked almost every question, some other that the people had it. So any final, I mean, word about the wishes or like essentially the advice to students? I think you mentioned about happiness and try to make everyone happy, but anything else, I mean, especially for like maybe some even not high schoolers, maybe some elementary schoolers or others, like, yeah, any advice, I mean, especially in the field of STEM, yeah.
Yeah, the questions that you ask are going to define your life, okay? Also, you need to hunt for what people's needs are. Wants and needs are different, okay? Wants sometimes mask the needs. And if you can find the needs and find a way of meeting those needs for your neighbors, you strengthen yourself, your neighbors, the communities that you live in, and the prospects for the continued evolution of humanity and life. And don't miss out on the beauty of culture. Listen to music, participate, read great books. Don't read just the great books of your culture, okay? Read Chekhov if you want to know something about what's going on in that part of the life. You can actually visit the past, by reading literature. Okay, learn a language. Okay, am I saying Fortran Pascal? Yeah, but how about Italian? I never learned Italian. Right? There are just so many things that you can do, but the number one thing is to be valuable to others. Okay, and that is going to make you happy in the long haul. Why? Because you've already decided to be happy in the first place. Okay? Do you want to be attractive? Well, don't worry about it. If you're happy, if you're identifying what needs are, if you're meeting the needs of others, okay, you will have great company. It's that simple, because they'll be interested in doing the same thing. That's it. Whoops. On mute.
So yeah, so I think great advice. Actually, some of these actually you mentioned about like beauty or others. I mentioned to my daughter as well. The same thing actually. And so thanks a lot for this live.
Wait. Yeah. How old is your daughter?
She's now, I think, 7.
7. Okay.
Yeah.
And the other advice is to remember this. She has to survive her teenage years, and so do you if you have prospects for being a grandparent, okay? Yeah. Now, the cool thing is you can always be a grandparent because there's always a kid who needs a grandparent. You just pick one. You can come to the World Finals and just be a grandparent for 5 or 10 minutes or for a lifetime if that's necessary. All right. However, anything that you did that your parents groused at you may well be done by your daughter in the process of exploring her life. Okay. Yeah. That's about it.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Essentially for your time here. I think that was great live, and we had it over all venues. I think hopefully the people will. I think these are some kind of memorials. I think like this. I think you had maybe some shorter time, but this probably I think now we are more than 2.5 hours essentially, and talking about this. I think that would be good. Hopefully, ideas and for the people to look at it, and also lots of other people who can look at it, watch it, and get more ideas essentially for their whatever goal that they have. I think, again, thanks for your time. That was a great thing. And we will make this one available. I think already it's available at YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And I think we will also put it in the ICPC. We will at least put the link also in the ICPC Facebook, such that everyone can look at it. Hopefully they enjoy the things.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. And thank you for this series, because it is really nice to be able to chat with other folks. And I wish everybody a great joy in their life. That's about it, I suppose, right?
Yeah, I mean, it takes time, but I think that is important, because this is something that is like, maybe it is like, whenever you talk about some of the things, maybe like they will ask us as a professor to go and give a talk about the research that we have done it, but not about our life. And this is somehow that we try to go dig into more in life, the goals, the way such that the people can see it. And of course, we talk about also about the research or like the important things, like, but at the same time also about the goals in life and other stuff. Thanks again for your time. So see you in the next ICPC contest, hopefully the national or the final one. And thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.